Hey everyone, this is Chris, and you're listening to One Cross Radio. And today we are joined by nobody. It's just me. Luna is actually downstairs. I'm recording upstairs in the uppermost part of my house. Right across from me is all my DVDs. I'm recording up here because right before I came upstairs, Jill decided to take a nap. Most of the time I like recording downstairs in the living room if I'm not recording with somebody else. That way I can still be with her and Luna. But when she's napping, I'm not going to be that jerk and be like, hey, wake up so I can record. And sometimes I got to hit while the passion's hot, or strike while the iron's hot, I mean. So that's what we're doing. And today we are, you know what, we've had a couple heavier episodes as of late. In some aspects, I mean, the 100th was great. It was a celebration, but it was also like, hey, there was a lot of work involved in that, going back through old episodes to figure out how I felt about them, also find those hilarious clips, but then reaching out to others. So that was heavy. And then it was heavy in that way, a good way, but still. And then doing the Let's Talk About episode. That was also heavy, where, yeah, it was about pop culture stuff, but it was also really bringing forward, like, look, and at the time of this recording, like, I'm out of a job in a couple weeks. That is a reality that is around me daily. It's not a fun reality. So please keep that in your prayers. And then one of our other recent episodes, I talked about social work, which is what I do for a living. It's what I do. It's what I went to school for. And it is something I'm passionate about. But it also has some weight to it. And it can be scary going into those things. Especially when you're talking about some of that stuff from a faith-based perspective, where from a Christian point of view as well. Like I said in that episode, when you've heard youth and coworkers at times being like, well, if I find out someone here is a Christian, like, I don't think that's compatible, so I'm going to try to get them fired. It's ridiculous that kind of thing happens, but it can be scary. It can be scary to then, it's motivating to be like, well, nope, not going to stop me from talking. But at the same point, it's like, oh man, especially as I'm in this spot where right now I don't know where I'm going to land. Not like I'm I was really scared about that episode, but it's, especially when you deal with anxiety, that's something that's just there, man. It's just there, homies. So it's been heavier. But today's episode is a return to lighter form, if you will, except for one certain spot I'm going to touch on. And it is inspired by the Geek Devotions podcast. I believe it's called Calm Talk with Geek Devotions. They're a great ministry and a great podcast. And I was listening, as I was walking with Luna earlier today, I was listening to a number of their episodes. And the ones that really got me wanting to talk about Superman were their episodes about Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, that starred Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain, and the bad guy from Mighty Ducks is Perry White. And actually, the guy who played Lex Luthor was also the doctor who created Poison Ivy in the absolutely terrible Batman and Robin. And I think he played Lionel in Smallville. I think, because, well, Smallville was what Smallville was, and it has its fans. I'm just not one of them. As much as I dug me some Dawson's Creek, I'm like, I don't dig Superman meets Dawson's Creek. It just wasn't my bag. So, as much as maybe eventually I will give Smallville another shot, today's episode is, we're talking Superman. And I forgot how much I really do enjoy Superman. He's not my favorite, but he's still a character that I really dig. And I really dig the optimism from that character. Probably a year, if not more, ago at this point, I wrote a post on the website. At that point, it was still probably $20.99 One Cross Street. It's now just all One Cross Radio. The website is onecrossradiopodcast.com. You can find it on there. I wrote about, it might have been a collections of thoughts post or maybe a full-on post. But I watched Supergirl and I was like, oh man, this is nice. Now I've heard the show's got very, very, very heavy politically, and shoehorns a lot of stuff in. I haven't actually watched it myself, so I can neither confirm nor deny. Just hear various interpretations of it. But what I watched, I dug. I've only halfway into the first season. I think I got up to the Flash crossover episode, and I dug it. But it had this sense of optimism. And I was just like, oh man, I love this in Superman, because it hadn't been there in a while. But we'll get into that in a bit. So this one is kind of like, as I was listening to that Lois and Clark podcast, it made me think of, there's been so many interpretations of Superman. Let's look at it. And I guess some of these are... the main two ones I'm talking to they have their fans, but they're still not like they're even, well, one is definitely treated as the black sheep, but the other one's almost forgotten. So we're going to start by talking about Superman Returns. I believe it came out in 2006. It was a year after Batman Begins, and it was a mixed bag. Some things worked and a lot didn't. But I still really, really dug it. What worked was for me anyway, the optimism, the actual optimism. One of the things I really, really dug in it was, towards the end, as the new Krypton Island is being formed, the Superman flies around and saves the city in numerous ways. And that's like the last time we saw that until Justice League, because Superman did save some people in Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, but Man of Steel was a pure destruction fest. So it was nice to see Superman save some people, save some buildings, and not just wreck everything in a fight. That was a nice touch. The score was so good. So good. The themes, and there was a lot of intentional or unintentional Christian themes in that, as there is with Superman. We're talking about a father who sends a son to save a people. And at various points, there's, in so many iterations of Superman, is he laying in, or posing like he's on the crucifix, like he's on the cross, and not even in a sacrilegious way. It's just, there's a likeness there, and so many people are aware of it at this point that they just lean into it. They don't try to make Superman Jesus or anything, but they're like, well, there's parallels. The stuff that didn't work with it is it gets tricky, just because the continuity of the flick is rough. It was a direct sequel to Superman 2, which, once the Donner Cut came out, made aspects of Superman Returns not possible. A large number. So if anybody's asking, like, hey, if you ever want to watch the Superman movies, I recommend 1, 2. If you are going to watch Superman Returns, if you want kind of that Donner universe, then you'd go Superman 1, Superman 2. I wouldn't recommend watching 3 or 4 because they're both really bad, and 4 is terrible. We're talking like potentially worse than Batman and Robin. And the Donner Cut is really, really good. It's a very different film, but the reason than the theatrical cut of Superman 2, but the reason I wouldn't say, hey, watch that if you're going to watch Superman Returns, is because if you try to line all 3 up, and you do the Donner Cut instead of the theatrical cut, then Superman Returns cannot do the things that it does. Alright, so Superman Returns, at the end of it, okay, I'll try to sum it up. In Superman 2, Lois figures out Clark is Superman. Superman takes her to the Fortress of Solitude, and he goes into this ray chamber thing, and it depowers him. And then him and Lois have a night, shall we say. And then, at this point, the Zod and the two other Kryptonians whose names I can't remember. Maybe not Gorilla Grodd, None, and I really wish I remembered the lady's name. It's just escaping me right now. Those three Kryptonians showed up, and then he tried to repower himself afterwards, and then he depowers them, and then they fall down chasms in the Fortress of Solitude. The first super kills, by the way, before everybody got upset at the super neck snap in Man of Steel. So in that, he regains his powers, and then Lois is kind of upset because she knows how Clark feels. Like, if he's Superman and they know if it gets out that they're together, like, it's going to be upsetting. Like, she's a target and all that. And then Superman, the movies gave him several powers that he didn't have. At one point in Superman 2, he friggin' pulls part of the emblem off his off his uniform, the S. He throws it at it, and it briefly stops None. It was really, really stupid, really weird. But then also, he kisses Lois, and he kisses her hard enough that it erases her memory. So then they still had that night together, but she forgets all of it. And that's where Superman 2 ends. Superman Returns picks up what is supposedly 5 years later, and Superman is literally returning to Earth. He left Earth because after encountering the Kryptonians, he wanted to go search for others. He was hoping more of his people had survived. In that time, the world moved on. Lois felt very angry at Superman. She wrote an article about why the world didn't need Superman. Lex had been in jail but had gotten out and had swindled an old lady into writing in his will that he would get her fortune and all that jazz. So then it's a really mopey film at points. Like, Superman's kind of emo a little bit. He gets sad. He watches Lois from outside because Lois is engaged to I just can't remember the actor's name, but she's engaged to Cyclops from X-Men. And he's mopey, but there's still some really good stuff in there, because in that mopiness he goes up into the outer atmosphere and he just pauses and takes in hearing all the cries out in the world, and then he goes, stops a bank robbery, stops an assault. It's this really, really good scene. But there's parts where Superman is kind of just super mopey and following Lois around, and it's stuff like that that makes it weird. Because you're like, what? Oh, wait, hold up, what? that's what he's doing? The super stalking kind of. And then he also does a lot of good things in the movie, and there's great moments of optimism. And the thing is, it is really a Donner Superman film, and I think that's what works against it. That's what I appreciate about it. But it's a 1970s Superman film in 2005. That is a hard juxtaposition to do. Things have changed. So in some aspects, if you look at it through the lens of what I just laid out, I think you can make it work for what it is, but it's still, that's not going to appeal to a wide audience. That's going to be a much more niche audience. Because at that point, in numerous ways, the world had moved on from Superman. And in several ways, that representation of him. I'm going to jump back to things that worked in a second, but a big part of what didn't work because of the continuity issues is this kind of, it follows Superman 2, but then it really ignores something about Superman 2. Lois has a kid in this, and then towards the end, when the kid is really worried about one of Lex Luthor's thugs hurting his mom, flings a piano across the room. And Lois doesn't freak out. And that's just, it's forever been something I can't get past. I can suspend my belief, but when you understand how driven the character of Lois is, who she is, how she doesn't back down from anything, she will put herself in harm's way for her story. She at times can become the damsel in distress, but she is not the archetype of the damsel in distress. She often needs rescuing, but it's not like she got kidnapped. She put herself in these situations to get the scoop because she's like, no, this needs to be exposed. She's not just a hanger-on. So when it's this character who has no problem standing up for herself, no problem yelling at anyone, be it Lex Luthor, supervillain, or her boss, she would naturally freak out about having a child with somebody that she has no recollection of doing the thing that results in having a child with. Like, that should have been... It's this whole kettle of fish. When you do that direct part. I mean, if they had done the kiss and she magically forgot and there was no child, then you never have to touch it again. But as soon as you put the child aspect in, you're like, Lois would be freaking the heck out. Like, she would be freaking out. I don't think you can put that out there and then not follow up on that. Not even hint on a follow up with it. She just accepts it and moves on. Like, that does not work. And I get it. It's because as soon as you try to focus on it, it gets really icky and really complicated. And there's no easy way out. But then again, if there's no easy way out, why put it in there? I know one of the themes is, like, he finds out, hey, you're not alone. You have a son. He needs you. And that can be why Superman doesn't die at the end of it. But it doesn't work. Like, you could have just done that where it's Lois being like, look, I love you. I need you. Don't go. You could have done that instead. I just realized that my computer mic is recording this and not the microphone that I've had over my hand over to make the sound better for the last 17 minutes. So that was a fun moment. So that's where you're running into issues. And it makes some things work in this and some things not. So, oh, there we go. Now this mic is back, I think. We'll see if there's any difference. Anyways, so one of the things I loved, though, is this is the movie where I'm like, more than any other Superman movie, you can point to it and explain why people don't just automatically know that Superman is Clark Kent. Because it's not just the hair has a curl and he takes off his glasses and suddenly everybody's like, oh my gosh! Like, it's not just the glasses. It is this whole persona. And I loved the scene in it where Lois and her fiancé are sizing Clark up. They're realizing, like, holy cow, like, this he's big, he's buff, like, there's a resemblance there. And then he does this goofy wave, and then they burst out laughing, like, yeah, okay, yeah, no, we're being ridiculous. This guy could be Superman? Like, that's what I love about it. Now, I know others like the later interpretations where Clark isn't just this bumbler. And I've heard people describe Clark Kent as a coward in comparison to Superman. I never thought that because Clark Kent in the animated series and then other parts, like, it'd still be this... He'd stand up for himself, but he'd still dial it back, so he'd be a little bit meeker. Just so then not all eyes would be on him. Like, it was a very different persona. And that scene in particular is the best differentiator. I found it struggled in the DCEU portion, where when Clark and Supes are basically the same person, then why would anybody not be eyeing Clark Kent as Superman? Like, that doesn't make any sense. They need to be very different. Something that was interesting about that Geek Devotions brought up was in Lois and Clark, it was much more focused on Clark, and they're like, Superman is the persona, Clark Kent is the actual person, which is a flip on how the comics and Superman Returns and the Donner original, and Supes 2 was, where Superman is the actual person, Clark Kent is the persona. And that's a really interesting point. But I still think there needs to be a difference. There has to be a difference between the two. Whatever the difference is, there has to be one. But this movie, I do love the idea of Clark Kent doing the right thing, being the well-meaning person who will stand up, but is still meek. Because that still sends a message to people like, look, you don't have to be Superman to try to do the right thing. To stand up for what's right and do what's good. But in the case of basically someone who's the power of a deity, you need, if you're going to do the whole split the split identity thing, then you need to have one be like the opposite of the other. And Ralph did a tremendous job. I really wish he had more of a chance to do more with this. I know I talked about a while ago what I heard the sequel that was going to be called Man of Steel was going to be, and I would still love that movie, and I think Brandon Routh could have knocked it out of the park. As someone picking up the cape from Donner, he channeled Donner, but there was still a little bit of his own in there, and the guy didn't get a fair shake. The movie didn't succeed because of so many reasons, but you cannot pinpoint it on him. Now we're going to talk about the big elephant in the room is Kevin Spacey. Because Kevin Spacey has done some terrible things. So I don't want to be like, yay, Kevin Spacey. I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to be like, oh, I think you can enjoy someone's performance and their work without enjoying them as a human being. That's the caveat I'll put on this. So I loved the performance of Lex Luthor here. Even though it was the Gene Hackman Lex Luthor, that's what they're going for, where it was another real estate scam. And then the next logical thing is, well, someone wants to kill Superman because they want to develop the flying car or something stupid. Like, that aspect of the character, which was the mad scientist or mad developer, whatever you want to say, that original aspect has since evolved in the comics and the great animated shows and movies. Like, the Kevin Spacey Lex Luthor is very much the Gene Hackman Lex Luthor, but he was so menacing at certain points and delightfully over the top that I dug the performance. It is still my favorite on-screen Lex Luthor. The moment where he over the toply yells wrong, to me, it worked. It worked well with the character, but especially the moment where even though you're like, wow, man, Superman's biggest foe in this movie is a bunch of nameless henchmen who get like friggin' 2 lines, including Kumar, and then he gets beat down on a kryptonite island by like 5 people. Yeah, when you look at it like that, it's not that cinematic. But the rest of it, that scene I really dig. The score in there is really good, but the part in particular that is just so good is when Hackman, when Hacklex, because that is the Hackman Lex Luthor, but Kevin Spacey doing a great performance. When he stabs him with the kryptonite knife, breaks it off in him, and then says, "Now fly," it's just so good to me. So Kevin Spacey did a terrific job, but he is not a good person. Let's go with that. That's what I'm saying. So I understand why the movie didn't work. I would love it if they could do the sequel as an animated movie. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking about a now often forgotten Superman animated movie. We'll be right back.
What's going on, Devoted Geeks? I'm Dallas Mora, and this is
Celeste.
We are the hosts of the YouTube show Geek Devotions, a show by a couple devoted geeks devoted to letting people know that they're loved.
Geek Devotions is a unique ministry designed to minister and encourage those who would call themselves a geek. Using genres like anime, comics, sci-fi movies, and books, we deliver fun and engaging devotions every Friday at 4 p.m. on our YouTube channel. You can find us by going to youtube.com/Geek Devotions.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching for Geek Devotions. Do us a favor though, if you decide to be part of our wonderful Devoted Geek family, after subscribing and following our pages, leave us a comment and let us know that you heard about us through this podcast.
Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget, stay devoted.
Peace and love!
Okay, and we're back. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the first in the of the released DC Universe animated original movies, which is a great line of straight to DVD or digital movies that DC has been doing. I actually really, really wish Marvel would take follow the lead with this, and they did for I think 2. But then they kind of stopped. I'm like, man, so many of your characters would be good for this, but they're just not doing it. And the one we're talking about is what I think is the often forgotten, or now forgotten, Superman Doomsday. So, Superman Doomsday was a loose adaptation of the death and reign of Superman comic books. And I say loose adaptation because it took all of those, jettisoned a fair bit of the stuff, and tried to tell the whole story in one 90-minute film. So it is what it is. I still enjoy it. Now, there's been a much more recent, much better adaptation called The Death of Superman and then The Reign of Superman. There are two movies, technically one movie. You could make that argument. I think they're both like 90 minutes each, so it fleshes things out so much more. And then you get Superboy, Eradicator, Steel, not Cyborg, because Cyborg's his own different character, but someone else. I can't remember the name of him. My bad. Don't take my nerd cred. That one did it better, but the thing is, there's some aspects of Superman Doomsday that I enjoyed more. The score was great. In particular, the thing that I really liked out of Superman Doomsday was the fight between Superman and Doomsday. Now, Reign of Superman, you can make the argument, did the fight better? But there's one moment in particular from Superman Doomsday which was so great and cinematic that I'm like, if I'm making this movie, like if I was ever to do a proper Death of Superman on the big screen, I would end it with this. Well, actually, no, because then you get to the tail end shot that, to me, is where you end it on such a fantastic friggin' downer note. But I would end it on, like the fight would end on the note that the fight in Superman Doomsday did, where Doomsday in this is more of a kind of a cyborg, kind of a machine, I believe. And he just kills. He just won't stop killing. There's no real character development to Doomsday. There was in Reign of Superman. He was a lot more sentient in that. Not Reign of Superman, Death of Superman. But in the Superman Doomsday part, he was like, Supes is coughing up blood. Doomsday is like clearly winning. And then he sees a little girl, and then he goes over just to smash this crying child. And then Superman runs up behind him, like wraps his arms around his waist, and for any wrestling fans out there, it looked like he was about to German suplex him, but instead, like, he launches up into space, and then they fight back down through the atmosphere. Like, Doomsday breaks his grip, but then Superman just starts decking him, and then ends up, like, shoulder tackling him, and throwing himself with his speed, the speed of gravity and all that, back down into Metropolis. Creates this crater, smashes all the glass and all that, and then that's how Doomsday dies. And that's just such, to me, such a great way to kill that character. It's cinematic. It absolutely is. That is the highlight from that movie for me. If I watch it now, I'm like, all right, I'll watch that. Actually, no, to be fair, I'll still watch the whole thing. But, like, there's other times now, especially with Reign and Death of, or sorry, Death of and then Reign of, I'll watch the fight from Doomsday, and then I'll go watch the other ones. But that fight in particular is just so good. It's so cinematic, and the score in it is outstanding that I'm just like, oh my gosh, man, that's begging for a live action adaptation. And I don't care that you've seen it animated. I would watch it in a heartbeat and then go out and give more money to like pay for another ticket just to see it again. It would look gorgeous. It'd be outstanding. And then you cut to the famous, the like infamous, whatever, the iconic, we'll go with that, shot where it's like the cape, like all torn, stuck in rubble, like fluttering in the wind, you fade to black, and that's how I'd end the flick. And in that movie, like, it then let you then open to the funeral and all that. And if I was making this, I'd get that ending, and then just the credits would come up when you saw the flag, because it's like, that's such a wonderful downer note to end it on. Yeah, outside of the fight, it's not the best. Anne Heche as Lois was an interesting casting. She did an okay job. I just found her voice very distracting. But there is some good stuff in the movie. But like I said, Death of and Reign of did it better. And what was really interesting with those ones, just to quickly go down that rabbit hole, is it wasn't even like, so the DC animated original universe films, they've got a couple different continuities. They've got their standalone films, which this one was. Then they've also got a Superman Batman continuity. They've got a Justice League JLA continuity. Then they also have a Year One continuity, a Dark Knight Returns continuity. But then within that, they also, and this is the one that's running on the most, they have their, they also have a Justice League Gods and Monsters continuity and Elseworlds continuity, which later today I'm going to watch Superman Red Sun, and I can't wait because that's such a good story. They also have the an anime one based on, it came out around the time of Batman Begins. After Batman Begins, it's set in the Nolanverse, but then they also had an Assault on Arkham one, which was great. So the main one that they have, though, is it's called the DC Animated Movie Universe, and it's mostly based on the New 52. So Death and Reign, what's, to me, is they did it really, really well, is a retelling very faithfully the death and reign of Superman story from the 90s, while factoring in New 52 continuity as they're doing in these films. So the aspect of Superman had been in the New 52, Superman was together with Wonder Woman, wasn't together with Lois Lane, whereas in the animated universe based on the New 52, they had been together. And he had started dating Lois Lane. So factoring in all those things, I'm like, you're adapting a couple different things. You could really lose this. Sometimes it works, like it did in this, and then as Hector Mire pointed out on the pull list, but then also one of the last episodes I had him on, it didn't work out so much with Hush, because then you lose it. You like in factoring in some of that continuity, your other characters who weren't there, they're now putting in, you're losing their moments, their time to shine. In Hush, it was a moment of Damian being like, you better use protection, and she's a criminal, talking about Catwoman, instead of this really great moment for Tim Drake. Tim has been really underserved. Whereas Death and Reign, it really adapted things really well, and towed that fine line incredibly well, so I gotta give it credit. So I'm going to wrap up that one on Doomsday. The final thing I want to briefly talk about is just my thoughts on Henry Cavill, and it's short. It's please don't be done. Please don't be done. None of the issues with the current Superman are Henry Cavill's fault. He is a terrific actor. I love his look as Superman. I do enjoy his performance, although I haven't enjoyed the writing. Man of Steel was not all it could have been, but that's, again, not on him. We finally got an optimistic Superman at the end of Justice League, and that was borderline the best part of Justice League. We're like, oh my gosh, we're finally getting that Superman again. Give us him. Just give us him. Give us him before Cavill walks away. DC, do this. Do this. I didn't have the beef that so many people did with Birds of Prey, but that could have been a misfire. It was a good one in my opinion, but it could have been a misfire. Get it together. Do a Superman movie before you lose your good Superman. He's so good. Okay, that's all I wanted to talk about. You guys are awesome. Thank you again so much for your love and support. And please go check out Geek Devotions podcast. I believe it, Com Talk. They're wherever podcasts are found. You can also find them on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that. They are great people, and they've got a great podcast and great ministry, so please check them out. All that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless, my friends. Peace!